Good day, everyone. I am Shalami Nino, and we will be discussing the philosophy of education, school of thought, realism, and education. We are now down to the second philosophy of education, which is the realism. So, from the idealistic approach, let's now take a shift to the realistic approach, and let's learn what do this approach could offer us. When we say realism, it refers to the view that the reality of any material objects exists in the external world independently of the human mind. Put differently, realism holds that what one perceives is real and it is out there existing in concrete reality. So, what the realism is trying to say is unlike the idealism, which focuses on the human mind, which means that they are basing the fact from what the ideas of the mind holds. On the other hand, the realism approach is opposed to that claim. The realism argues that reality is what actually exists. So, what you could see, what you could touch, feel, and experience are the ultimate reality or the physical objects. So, those things are the ones who's real. So that should be the things that needs to be studied or learned. So the focus is the body. So from the mind, the move away is towards the body. So unlike the idealistic, it focuses on what you think, while the realistic focuses on what you could touch, feel, move, experience, and all the wonderful things that you could do. And that's the things that and those are the things that we should share to our students. So next slide. Aristotle, as you can see here in the picture, Aristotle was the proponent here. So it was Aristotle who first popularized realism when he opposed Plato's idealism. So he also argued that the real exists in the sensible world which can be known through experience. And also, the real is what we should be teaching instead of the ideal, which is in the people's mind. Because if I'm not going to propagate my ideas, I don't express nor share what's inside my mind, it will and always remain as a mere thought inside my head. And then it will eventually fade, lost, or not be remembered on the long run. So, from just looking at the mind into focusing on the body, it brings us to a different aspects of studies or disciplines like physics, chemistry, biology, sociology, and many other fields. So it begins to take shape because we started to look into reality. So the key to realism is what you can see, is what you will question. So the things that you could see is what you will question. What you could feel, touch, and experience are the things that you will ask. So when you can never see, touch, nor feel ideas, you can never experience ideas unless if it is being transformed into words by someone. So for the realist, developing the whole child, you need to develop them physically, spiritually, emotionally, and not just mentally. So all the aspects are important. So the focus shift from the mind to the rest of the human body. So, and its experiences, what it can experience, and what it should experience. So, next slide. So, we have here classical traditions, um, in which we will be tackling the Aristotelian realism and the religious realism. So first is the Aristotelian realism. So Aristotle was the founder of Lyceum, teacher of Alexander the Great, and the father of logic. So when in terms of life, here, when in terms of life, um, Aristotle, for some time, he was the teacher of Alexander the Great. So upon returning to Athens, he started his own school known as the Lyceum. An Athenian gymnasium dedicated to god Apollo. So next, we have influence. So here we have the influence. So, unlike Plato and Socrates, Aristotle had a greater focus on the importance of empirical evidence in his studies. So, he collects data and go around to ask the people personally to know their opinions and ideas. Now, let's go down to logic. Um, Aristotle created the field of symbolic or formal logic that is used in everything from philosophical argument to computer programs today. So his syllogism, like all men are mortal, Socrates is a man, therefore Socrates is mortal. So were the foundation for what is known as syllogistic or categorical logic. Next is next is telos or the study of purpose. Aristotle's theory covered a wide range of discipline. Much more than Plato, he separated academic disciplines into separate categories instead of saying that all of them can be covered on one single theory. However, there are some common themes and some are very big important ideas to Aristotle's philosophy. So Aristotle rejected Plato's forms in favor of teleological explanation of the world. So appropriately, as his name means the best purpose in Greek, Aristotle's philosophy focuses on the telos or purpose of all things. We were not shadows of perfect forms, but rather beings which each with our own purpose or telos in life. So everything according to Aristotle could be described in terms of its goals or purpose, and he said that all things had a purpose and their natural state was to strive to achieve the purpose. So here we have ethics. So the purpose of man for Aristotle was to reason. So if we want to reason well, we need to reason virtuously. So if you may ask, how can we be virtuous? So in opposition to other more modern ethical theories, Aristotle talks less about what particular actions are good. Instead, how to be a good person. So the virtues that Aristotle extols are the balance between two vices. So bravery might be the balance between cowardice or brashness. So virtue ethics exists to this day as one of the three main ethical theories, the with consequentialism and deontology. And then next we have the religious realism. So here we have Thomas Aquinas. So Thomas Aquinas was an influential theo influential theologian, Christian priest, doctor of the church who belonged to the era of medieval philosophy. So he was also regarded as an eminent figure in the tradition of uh, schola, scholasticism, scholasticism. So his main interest on the branches of he his main interest lied on the branches on metaphysics, theology, epistemology, and etc. So now let's discuss his faith and reason, the essence of existence, and his most famous concept of God. So first is the faith and essence. Faith and reason rather. So according to Aquinas, faith or revelation and reason are not opposed to one another. But faith is undoubtedly higher than the reason. He says both are not opposed to one another because many times reason is used in order to defend faith by destroying the objections, criticisms by the means of rational thinking. So, on the other hand, he also believes that reason, working on its own, may not fully understand the gravity of faith or the gravity of religion and the gravity of theology. So, basically, he is saying that the fight is not between faith and reason, but the fight is in order to understand that there exists God and he is the supreme most, and one needs faith. So to conclude, both reason and faith are like the two sides of the coin, so they go together. But it is very important to understand, he says, that it is faith primarily which dominates over reason. But Aquinas does not disregard the latter, that he does not disregard reason altogether. So next um, is the ess- essence and existence. This is his second concept. So the essence and existence, Aquinas was highly influenced by Aristotle. And as a result, it could be said that he took the Aristotelian approach in many of his works and theories. So example is the concept of Aristotle's forms and matter. So Aquinas um, relates the concept of essence with forms and the concept of existence with matter. So basically, Aristotle believed that both form and matter cannot exist apart. Similarly, Aquinas says that both essence and existence go together. According to him, essence exists in divine mind before creation and later in things and in human mind. So, excuse me. Essence are primarily universal in nature, while existence is basically particular or individual in nature. So the same goes with the concept of form and matter, which Aristotle claims that form is universal and matter, on the other hand, is particular or individual in nature. So we are now down to the last but his famous concept of God. So as what we have learned, Aquinas is a believer of God, which he stated here the two proofs of primary reasons. First is human beings learn via experience. So going back to the realism approach, we learn through our senses, from what we experience based on the physical world. So they learn about God by experience and faith. The second one is there is also an exist of atheism. So we all know that atheism is the belief of not believing God. So proofs or arguments for existence of God are highly needed to prove that he exists. So going back to Aquinas being an Aristotelian, so Aquinas rejected the concept of ontological argument for the existence of God, which he rejects the priority of ideas. So in simpler words, he believed that by merely having an idea of God, God's existence cannot be proved. So for an instance, I'm having an idea of a food. So if I am thinking of a food, it will not it would not magically appear in front of my table. Likewise, the idea of the existence of God. Therefore, according to Aquinas, God only be known via reflection. Okay? I hope you get the concept. So, we are now down to the we are done discussing the classical realism, no? So now let's take a shift to the modern realism. So one chief problem of classical realism was its failure to develop an adequate method of inductive thinking. Although classicists have developed the thesis that reality, knowledge, and value can be ascertained by studying particulars. They still were caught in an essentially deductive style of thinking. So they often had their truth in hand at the start, never really doubting a first cause or the unmoved mover. So modern realism developed out of attempts to correct such errors. And these corrective attempts were at the heart of what today is called the scientific revolution that swept Western culture. So of all the philosophers engaged in this effort, um, perhaps Francis Bacon and John Locke were the two most outstanding realist thinkers that were involved in developing systematic methods of thinking and ways to increase human understanding. So, to give you a little background about Bacon, so he was not he was not only a philosopher, but also a politician. So he was known for his famous work, the Novum Organum, or the advancement of learning, which he challenged Aristotelian logic. So Bacon attacked the Aristotelians for contributing to the lethargic development of science by their adoption of theological methods of thought. So the problem with theology was that it started with dogmatism and a priori assumptions and then deduced conclusions. So Bacon charged that science could not proceed this way because science must be concerned with inquiry, pure and simple inquiry, um, not burdened with preconceived notions. So Bacon held that science must begin in this fashion and must develop reliable methods of inquiry. So by developing a reliable method of inquiry, humans could be freed from dependence of the occurrence of infrequent geniuses and could develop knowledge through the use of effective um, acquisition of knowledge. So we could deal more effectively with the problems and forces that that beset us on every side. So to accomplish these things, we devised what he called the inductive method. So next is so excuse me na nalubat ang atong laptop. So going back to the discussion, again, um, he devised what he called the inductive method. So this method is the logic of arriving at generalization on the basis of systematic observation of particulars. So the general thrust of this view can be found in Aristotle, but Aristotle never developed it into a complete system. So according to Bacon, induction involves the collection of data about particulars, but it is not merely a cataloging and enumeration of data. So the data must be examined where where contradictions are found. So some ideas must be discarded. So in addition, facts must be processed or interpreted at the same time. So Bacon maintained that if the if the inductive method were well developed and rigorously applied, it would benefit us to the extent that it would give humans more control over the external world by unlocking the secrets of nature. So next we have John Locke. Ala ka, namali ang PPT. John Locke na siya. Sorry, my mistake. So this is John Locke, not Francis Bacon. So disregard na lang ng name. Direta focus kang John Locke. So next we have John Locke. Sorry again, my bad. So the John Locke's contribution to realism were his investigations into the extent and certainty of human knowledge. So he traced the origin of ideas to the object of thought or whatever the mind entertains. So for Locke, there is no such things as innate ideas. So at birth, the mind is like a blank sheet or a blank sheet of paper or what he called a tabula rasa on which ideas are imprinted. So thus, all knowledge is acquired from sources independent of the mind as a result of reflection on data from independent sources. So in other words, all ideas are derived from experience by way of sensation and reflection. So Locke's view on education as expressed in some thoughts concerning education are not as theoretical as his speculations on epistemology. So they are practical ideas about conduct, laziness, rewards, and punishment, and other generalities in the educational process. So Locke's ideas lead to the kind of gentlemanly education for which English education is noted. So one might argue that despite Locke's philosophical penchant for democracy, his educational ideas lend themselves to an aristocratic elitism. So next, in terms of I so next we have the implications of realism in education. So here we have aims of education. So the aim of education is to prepare the child for a happy and successful life. So a realist education aims to first is acquaint the child with nature and social environment. So second, develop the physical and mental powers of the child. So third, develops and train the senses of the child. Four, prepare the child for real life. Five, provide understanding of the material world through inquiry. Six, transmit culture and develop human nature. Um, and lastly, is enable the child know the world in order to ensure survival and good life. So next we have the methods of teaching. So in terms of method of teaching, according to realism, from the personality of both the teacher and the students, um, and allows the fact to speak for them. So in the process of presenting facts, the teacher's opinion is not asked and should be focusing on the facts. So they must present, or the teacher must present the facts and must not add anything from their own perspective. So the details of contents and the principles of presentation and the emphasis to be given at places will be determined by the specific nature of facts, and we will only focus on the facts, and our personal opinions and ideas are not required. Okay, so next we have the curriculum in a realist education. So as developed according to the curriculum, it, as the curriculum the curriculum in a realist education as developed according to utility and needs. So for this reason, the curriculum in a realist education contains subject concerning day-to-day activities. So here the main subjects are natural science, physical science, healthcare, physical exercise, math, geography, history, and astronomy. So it all focuses on the day-to-day activities that a certain students could experience or could engage into. Then now, going back to Locke or John Locke, so he emphasized the educational value of physical activity. And he believed that children should spend more time in the open air and should accustom themselves to heat and cold, shine and rain. So we must engage the students into outdoor activities. So he also believes that instruction in reading should begin as soon as a child is able to talk, and that writing should begin soon afterwards. So next, ay, so realism curriculum. So we are now down to the role of the teacher. So realism is in favor of training of teacher before they involve in teaching. Hence, in a real state location, teachers should have a full knowledge of subject matter, psychology, psychology of learners, and scientific way of delivering education. So that the teachers must also encourage the learners to observe and experiment the natural objects and phenomena. So that learners will be able to find out new facts with respect of construction of knowledge. So lastly, the teachers should inform learners about scientific discoveries, inventions, and researches in different fields of knowledge. So we are now down to the critic of realism. So I guess this is the last topic that we will tackle. So critic of realism. So first we have realism treats metaphysics as meaningless. So the realists make no provision for the world of the supernatural and takes an agonistic view towards it. So also, most of the positions of traditional metaphysics are relegated to the realm of irrelevancy. So next, number two, there is a stress on content much more than the methods. So the second, um, so the second, this this emphasis often leads to rote memorization, which is one of the major weaknesses of traditional school. Thus, lip service may be paid to the goals of developing critical thinking, understanding, and other complex intellectual functions, but little is done by the student to attain these goals. So number three, in realism, there is little attention for developing an educational theory. So most of the philosophical realists of this school pay little or no attention to developing an educational theory consistent with their basic philosophical beliefs as Dewey, Brody, Adler, and Martian have done. So if you are familiar with those people, so you will understand what I am saying. So next one is there is too much emphasis on sense, experience, and realism. So as what we have discussed earlier, no, so realism really focuses or highlights the idea of experiences. Then the realist does not accept the existence of um, transcendental beings. So hence there is a tendency in in a realist education that the spiritual needs of the students are jeopardized. So next is the curriculum proposed by most realists is one-sided. So today, the effect of realism has given rise to the wave of science. So it is right, but there should be no indifference towards art and literature. The realist supports this negligence. Also, the curriculum proposed by most scientific realists is one-sided, since empirical knowledge holds a position superior to that of the humanistic studies. So this neglect is evident in the absence of a well-defined theory of art education. So next is there is an emphasis on the immediate reality of the physical. So world critics are one are of the opinion that realism ignores the ultimate reality of the spiritual world on account um, of immediate reality to material world. But the immediate reality as perceived through the senses and interpreted by intellect derives its significance only from ultimate reality, and the former cannot by any logical reasoning by isolated from the latter. So in fact, it is such an unnatural divorce of the physical from the spiritual reality that has led to the moral and spiritual bankruptcy of the present generation. So next, we have number 7, no place for intuition and meditation. So according to realism, all the knowledge is um, derived from observation and experimentation. So it does not accept the claims of intuition and meditation as much as superior source of getting knowledge. So next is more importance only to scientific subjects. So realism gives too much emphasis to science and technology and altogether ignores the importance of the non-material subjects like arts, culture, religion, and morality, then etc. So, but according to this critic, science and technology do not by themselves have any value unless they serve as instruments for developing our moral and aesthetic life. So the last critic for realism is that there is no faith, there is no faith, rather, and external values and high ideals of life. So in realist education, there is no faith in eternal life and high ideals of life. So realism has no faith in eternal values and highest ideals of life. So it has faith only in the harsh realities of daily life. So I guess that's the end of our discussion for this topic. Thank you for listening, and I hope you gain knowledge and have a great day ahead.